So I have worked in SaaS companies. I've also worked in service-based organizations, and currently I am in a private equity space, helping to advise our portfolio companies on best practices. Throughout all of the learnings, you start to realize that there's so many assumptions that are made about customer experience, what we believe they're going through, what we believe is going to be most important to implement. And so often we forget to ask the customer if that's what they want. And so it's important to at least be able to say, have you asked the customer? Especially in CS, we hear so much of the customer story. We are advocating so often for things that our customers want, need, expect, etc. But it's hard to convey that without really putting a customer voice on it. It's kind of like, it's if I say it, it's selling. If a customer says it, it's truth. If you're not asking regularly and we're not getting insight regularly, we're navigating this entire situation blind. Part of it is all of the signals that I have, and then this outside third-party validation, and then being able to go back and say, here's what, actually, and not even say, here's what we think. It's really saying, okay, what are you hearing and what do you want to do to implement change? And letting those portfolio companies come back and say, here's what we'd like to do, and us being able to say, would you like some help? There's a lot that you can ask at B2P as a third party that customers are more willing to share with you because they feel like they're giving sort of their own market insights and their own story versus just focusing on like our product and our service. There's more quality that we get. We could choose not to do it and sort of guess. I think that's the cost and the risk, right? If we don't do it at all, we run the risk of building things that customers don't care for. If we don't do it well, we can run the risk of just wasting our time and effort when we could have been doing something else. When you're working as a consultant for our portfolio companies, you're really trying to understand, what are they hearing? What are we hearing? And there's somewhere in between there's some level of truth. One area that we are very concerned about is before we go and spend all of this time and effort and energy and money into solving for some of these problems or opportunities that we know are out there, let's validate that that's the right thing to do, because we've been wrong before. It's better to know for a fact and solve for a problem that's truly there than it is to assume. And that was one of the reasons why we chose to go with B2P. Essentially, it helped set us up to where we understood where to spend that time and effort. As you're looking at how do we get better, it's hard. It's harder to say, well, how do you get better when everything is soft and mushy? So instead, let's start to gather the data that helps us decide where our strongest leads are, where our strongest customers come from. The data that you're collecting, even though it feels like it's more qualitative, it can still be boxed into quantitative results. And I think that that's where you start taking qualitative conversations and assigning a quantitative outcome to it. It's really important for us to have a resource like B2P that can come in, apply the framework that you've applied in the past, get people to understand. And I think you also bring in a lot of the other resources, like other key players, because this learning, it's going to impact marketing. It's going to impact your product team, your support team, your sales team. So it's really being able to say, we can get useful information, help you build out that action plan. Hopefully, if all goes well, the teams are out there in the next, 90 days building out a solution to some of the opportunities that you were able to unpack. The reality is, like, sure, I could do some of the interviews, but the reluctance that a company would display giving me their customer contact information, allowing me to ask some of these in-depth, probably really personal questions, the bridge would be too difficult to cross. And so having B2P as a resource is really just like win-win for everybody. What makes me most excited about all of this work is that we can get cross-functional teams to hear how they're impacting our customer. In addition to that, we're getting that neutral third party who's able to talk to our customers, our portfolio companies' customers, gather their story, gather their insights, and position it back to a place that's easily digestible for people who work at that portfolio company, and also us who, have majority ownership of that portfolio company. So we can figure out, are there resources that we can give from our side to help them move the needle faster? I would tell a new leader, a younger version of myself, that customer insights are qualitative and quantitative. We talk about like leading metrics, we talk about, you talk about outcomes, you talk about all of these things, and they're all great buzzwords. And when you're working with these C-suite leaders, you're going to start to find that they think about everything in a metrics-driven format. So if you want to accomplish something with them, you have to be able to speak to the quantitative insights, because that's what resonates with them the most. Where we just need to get to is, what is the story? And how do I follow along with the data that supports the story you're telling me? It's similar to having a picture book. I can look at the picture and I can kind of know what's going on in the picture, or I could read the bottom and the bottom tells me what's happening. If you're starting to recognize who has a seat at the table, it's the people who have the picture book and the story. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, and also my biggest learning in the past, let's say, 3 years.